Hi you guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I want to talk about the Christian conundrum of cohabitation. Did I say that right? Yes. So you guys know I love a good alliteration. The English teacher in me loves a good alliteration. So I want to talk about this topic because I recently got married 4 months ago. Yes, 4 months ago. September, October, November, December, January. 4 months ago. And one of the questions that I got a lot was, are you guys living together? Are you guys moving in together before you get married? And I would say that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I would have thought about it. But for this situation, I was like, no. And that's because I've just learned a lot more about how the female brain works versus the male brain works, what has historically worked, what the science says, what the research says around that, and how that all aligns with what I've learned from my Christian upbringing and what the Bible actually says. So I want to talk about this conundrum because the truth is that there's no specific Bible verse that tells you not to cohabitate. And a lot of times we're looking for something like that to be like, no, absolutely not, because this topic is so, for some people, it's really gray. And so the answer is no. There's no Bible verse that says do not live together before marriage. And that's why I think a lot of Christians have moved into this model where they're okay with it, because everything that was taught around cohabitation was all about not having sex. And so Christians were like, well, if we're not having sex, then why does it matter if we move in together? Because that was always the argument for why you shouldn't cohabitate. For a lot of families, that's kind of what it was like. It was just the temptation. You're going to be tempted, which I think it's genuine, but I also think a lot of people do have self-control. They do. They have self-control and they're able to, be in the same room and not engage in sexual activity. I would say that's not true for most people, but there are people who are like that. So that argument kind of falls apart, right? When you use that as the basis for why you shouldn't cohabitate. Another argument for why you shouldn't cohabitate as a Christian is that the model in the Bible is that you're with your family and then you leave your family and cling to your husband. You don't cling to a boyfriend. You don't cling to a fiance. And I will say that I don't think like living together before marriage is a primary issue. I don't think this is a salvific issue. I definitely think that it's a conviction issue where I would question what else you're compromising on, if this is something that you're willing to compromise on. But who am I? Because everybody's in different areas of their walk with the Lord. So I'm gonna say this off the bat. Personally would not recommend it, would never recommend it for my child, would never recommend it to students, would never recommend it to any young woman that I know. But whatever. So that's another argument, is that the model in the Bible is that you don't go live with another man until you're married. And so that has always been, something that has sort of circulated that topic for Christians. And in recent years, what's happened is that people are like, well, I want to try it out. I want to test you. I want to make sure that this is going to work out. And to me, that's the piece that doesn't sit well with me. Number one, yes, the appearance of evil. Like if you're living with someone, people are going to assume in this day and age that you're sleeping with them. So number one, I chose not to cohabitate because I did not want the appearance of evil. I did not want people, because that's a scripture that you should not be doing things that give the appearance of sin, like you're sinning. So if I'm moving in with a man, people are going to assume that you're sleeping with him. And as a Christian, what model does that say with the world, right? Again, we're supposed to be in the world, not of it. So deciding to go into relationships the same way the world goes into relationships, it seems a little bit hypocritical, right? Because we're supposed to be different from the world. And so, as I was saying, I chose not to cohabitate because I didn't want to give the appearance of evil. Oh, we're moving in together. Of course, people make assumptions. Even if we were not going to engage in sexual activity, it still didn't sit well with me. The second piece is women have to understand, and this is something that people will deny, but this is a fact. When you move in with someone and you are not married, you automatically go into audition mode, because the goal, like your nervous system for hundreds of years, thousands of years, has associated living with a man without your parents as wifehood. This is biological for women. So the minute we get into a situation where we're pretending like we're married, you're now auditioning to be a wife without the benefit, without the legal, spiritual, and emotional commitment of being a wife. The other thing that often happens when you move in with the men is you begin to do wife things. So now you're cooking meals, you're organizing schedules, you're acting married without being married. And at the end of the day, you know deep down inside that that's not what you want, because it's not stable. At any point, because he is not married to you, he has not made you his wife, you guys have not had a wedding, he can leave and you can leave at any point. So it's really not a stable situation. It's not stable. So making that decision did not feel right to me, to go into a situation where things could happen and you could just leave. I've now moved out of my apartment. I've moved all my stuff, into a home with you. We're on a lease together and with no binding commitment. And people will say like, we've been together for years. I know it's coming. But when I look at these women, you guys, I can see in their eyes that they're just waiting and hoping and praying that he will propose one day. Why would you put yourself in that situation? And on that same vein, you guys, a man who men know, like they know. This is a myth in our society now that men need like days and weeks and months to figure out, years, I should say, to figure out if a woman is compatible. Most men know within 3 to 6 months. So what ends up happening a lot of times is you're in a situation where a man has not proposed to you, but you've been with him for years and years and years playing wife. And the longer you play wife, the longer you're invested in this relationship and the harder it is for you to leave, even if he's not the one. Because now you've invested all this time, you've played wife for a long time. That is a recipe for disaster. It's just what I'm saying. And this has been my experience personally, and my experience with watching my friends and other women in these relationships with these men and moving in with them before they have committed to marriage. And now they're in audition mode and they're just hoping and praying that this man, begging essentially with their behavior for this man to marry them. Because deep down, they know that this is the situation in which you should be married. Okay, so that was reason number 2. A third reason I chose not to is because I simply don't believe in giving men wife benefits without the legal protection of marriage. The gift of my presence, the gift of being like, I get to come home to this woman, is a wife gift. It is not a girlfriend gift. The beauty of having a feminine presence in your home when you come home without paying for it, without the payment would be the wedding, is a no-go for me. And I think a lot of women don't recognize their value. They don't recognize that it is a gift to allow a man to know where you are, to know what you're doing at all times, to know where you're sleeping at night. That's a gift. That's a gift that you give to your husband. It's not a gift that you really give to random men on the street or men who have not legally and spiritually committed to you. And so I understood that. Thankfully, I had some really wonderful older women pouring into my life and explaining to me that the gift of having a feminine presence in your home is something that is, the price of that is a spiritual union. That is the price of that. You pay for that. You do not go 50-50 for that. And that's another thing. A lot of women are moving in with these men and going paying, they're in these roommateships with these men. And again, that puts you in the friend category because now you're in a roommateship with these men and they have not requested for your hand in marriage. And to me, that just didn't sit well. And I can understand why Christians is appealing to Christians, because on the surface level, the argument is, if something happens, I'll know that this person is not the one. I want to see who they are. Marriage has worked out for years and years and years, and they haven't, but they have as well, where people committed to loving each other as long as their values matched. And I think what we're seeing is we don't know what it means to love someone. So we think that it's whether or not they put the dishes in the dishwasher wrong, or whether or not it's where they put the toilet paper, or it's whether or not they can pick their towel up off the ground. We think that that's a real deal breaker. We think it's a deal breaker that they snore. We think it's a deal breaker that they, stay up later than we do. Whatever. We don't know what real deal breakers are in our society. So we're looking for things to go wrong. Can you imagine moving in with someone and the pretense is, I want to see if this is going to work out? That doesn't feel good in here to me. That doesn't seem right. So I'm going to test drive this relationship, see if I like you, and at any time I can push you out the door because you don't match my checklist. And you guys, the research says, let me read you guys some statistics about moving in before marriage. So let me see. I took some, I had some notes here. So let me talk about this first. Couples who cohabitate before marriage do not have the same relationship stability as people who do not. Okay? Because, well, they think it's because there's an inherent uncertainty when you move in with someone. And so everybody is on edge. Everybody is anxious a little bit because when you have the presence of the legal binding document that you're together and that we're both in this, there is a safety and security that exists within your soul where you're like, okay, this person's not going anywhere, so I don't have to be anxious. Couples who cohabitate before marriage often avoid real conflicts during that cohabitation because, like I said before, people are on their best behavior because they're auditioning for a role. So we think that, oh, if I move in and I move in with them, I'm going to see the real them. No, people can wear masks for a long time. And so we think that, oh, I'm going to figure this out. But what happens is they wait until the marriage contract happens and then they relax because they're no longer in audition mode. The other thing is studies have shown that couples who habitate before marriage report lower levels of relationship satisfaction compared to couples who wait until marriage to live together. They don't have the reasoning here, but this is my guess. My guess is that when you get married, there's inherently this like excitement and joy and this process in the relationship where you're supposed to take your relationship to a new level. If you're pretending to be married before by living together, you don't get that same satisfaction after the marriage. And in fact, you guys, one of the things that struck me the most, and one of the reasons why I did not live with my husband before we got married, is I had a really dear friend say to me, she moved in with her boyfriend before they got married. She said, I came home after that wedding and nothing was different. And I was waiting for something to be different. I was waiting for it to feel different. And it didn't. And she said, you're going to want that feeling. You're going to want that feeling of now we're married. But she's like, I didn't get that because we were doing all the married stuff before we were married. And so there was no next level. Like Spencer and I get to have this We get to deepen our relationship now that we're together more often and we're learning things about each other. And it's keeping the honeymoon stage going. It's keeping it exciting. But a lot of couples, by the time they get married, if they've moved in together, they miss that honeymoon stage because you don't get the same buildup. And I know someone's going to say that wasn't me and that, but in general, that's what the studies are saying. And of course, if something goes wrong, let's say, you guys are living together and then it doesn't work out. Well, in a marriage, either he has to support you or you have to support him with some legal action. If you're just boyfriend and girlfriend, what's the point? You leave and you get no protection. He doesn't have to pay for anything. You have to pay for all of your expenses to move out. It really does a lot of damage psychologically and financially when these things don't work out. So for me, it was a no-go. And here's what I want to say too about Christians. So a lot of Christians will say, well, we're engaged and we're going to move in while we're engaged. That's where I would say the same logic applies. So you will inherently do some kind of damage, in my opinion, if you're not married, because you're still a fiance, you're still not a wife, and you kind of lose the essential parts of marriage that make the progression of a marriage so wonderful and so beautiful. So if you're living together for a year before you get married, you may as well get married, because you're experiencing the essential parts of a marriage. Like, you move in together, you figure things out, you figure out where things go, and you do that in the confines of this legally, spiritually, and emotionally binding document. You do that with rest in your soul, versus I'm moving in, I'm a fiance. What if what if things are not working out? What if I find something about him that I don't like, right? And then you break off the marriage. So here's what I've learned. This was something that I learned from when I was doing relationship coaching. One thing that happens when you get married is that you actually are more tolerant of things when you're married than when you're not. And because you say, okay, we're together, this thing happened, both parties are more willing to work on their issues when you're married versus when you're not. So the irony here is, we think that if we just move in and figure it out, then I can tell if this person is going to work out or not. Not understanding that when you get married, that person's going to show up in real life anyway. So you may as well save yourself the trouble of moving in before marriage and just marry the person, because all that stuff is going to come out either now or 2 years from now when you actually get married. Like, that was like, because subconsciously, most people are not acting in their full self until they get married. So you're like, I'm gonna figure this out. Yeah, we're gonna move in together. I'm gonna see if she's the one. I'm gonna make sure my checklist is right. And meanwhile, she's auditioning, right? And then you get married, and anyway, her full self comes out, and your full self comes out, because you guys are both on eggshells, knowing subconsciously that you're testing each other. You're testing the waters. Does that make sense? So back to the Christian conundrum, because I think a lot of Christians, including myself, could make somewhat valid points for living together before marriage. We're living in separate rooms. We're sleeping in separate rooms. We're not having sex. We're not sleeping in the same bed. We're not doing any of that. And if that's the reason, then we don't want to do it. But I think God has a beautiful design for how the trajectory of marriage works. And that has nothing, honestly, to do with sex. Like, that's part of it. Like, that piece is the part of, like, the sealing of the relationship and the union of the relationship, cleaving and becoming one. But beyond that, there's a beautiful trajectory that happens when you get married, you move in together, you have sealed your relationship with this seal from God, from your witnessing with your family and friends, and you learn to grow with each other and love each other under that pretense. There's something really beautiful about that. And I can tell you that your partner is going to trigger you regardless. And I've said this before in other videos. Your husband will trigger you. I'm speaking as a woman, right? But him triggering you in the confines of marriage versus outside of marriage is very different, right? And if you're a believer, you know that being triggered is not a reason for divorce. So what does that do? That makes you more holy. That makes you, it's like you're being chiseled, you're being molded. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That sort of acceptance that this is my husband, this is who he is, doing that in the confines of marriage versus the confines of cohabitation is God's design. And so if there's anything I can say, it's go ahead. If you want to move in together before marriage, have at it. But I am telling you that you are messing with the original design for how marriage works, and you are potentially putting yourself at risk for missing out on some of the most beautiful parts of the trajectory of marriage, the beautiful part of how you're developing and growing in a marriage. Because it's really cool, it honestly is, to see like what we were like in month 1, even just 4 months from now. I'm like, oh, I see now why God designed it this way. You are apart, you get together under the confines of marriage, and then as you guys are working it out, you guys are, learning how to live together, work together, grind together in this, partnership, and molding each other. And your love is deeper because you did so under the confines of marriage. So that is my thoughts on the Christian conundrum of cohabitation. I understand that everyone has their reasons. I understand that everyone has different situations. I will say that I think it's very different to move in like a month before versus like a year before versus like a week before, but for me, I stayed in a hotel the week before our wedding, as to not damage that. And some people may call that extreme, but to me it was worth it because we got to experience like the full movement of a marriage. So anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's really long. Wow. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and leave your comments below. I want to know what you guys think. If you disagree with me, that's okay. Please, if you agree with me, leave a comment below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.